Hello, my wonderful friends. Magus with you on a beautiful night in Asha. If you're brand new to the channel, we're Zoroastrians. We are the Magi. And I want to share with you the Magi's greatest secret of magic. Now, there's a lot that goes into it, but if you have the foundation of Asha, this is the next step. And it's quite simple and quite powerful. And what it is, it's create with word. And here we're going to be talking about spelling, the written word, the magic in it. Have you seen, I'm sure you have, stories that have come true, and it's something that actually happens, and then they go back and they saw it was written many, many years ago, and it was like one of those self-fulfilling prophecies. This is a real thing. A great example I like to use is when I was in Florida, and that man that had OCD from the time he was a child, he was well into his adulthood, and it was getting worse. He went to all the counseling and drugs. They had told him it's not going to get better. I wrote a different story for him. We'd actually sit down at the beach and draw a circle in the sand and tell a new story about when you're in this circle, what the world is like, what you're like. And he was completely healed. I mean, it's magic. It's a miracle. And it's writing a better story, a good story. There's power in our spelling. There's power in our words. You know, spoken word is powerful. You know, Zarathustra used to say, "Good Spirit, teach me to speak the words of your mouth." But the true power comes from speaking the words of Vohumenu, the God mind, with what you are, more than beyond just spoken words, but you speak with your frequency. It's an electromagnetic field that goes out into the world and creates. And something happens when you take ink and paper and you write it out and you believe, the magic happens. And so I want us to experience some magic tonight. I want you to see this. You know, you won't see with your eyes if you can't see it in your heart and mind first. You have to be very specific when you're creating Asha, seeing yourself as a divine health that sickness and disease dies when it touches you, a light so bright that the darkness flees. You're so holy, the evil spirit dare not attack. You're blessed in everything you lay your hand to, but you have to envision it and picture it and write it. And that's what we're going to do together. A little warning, and you're going to think, "Oh, Magus, you're joking." This is real magic. This is powerful. You will feel it. And I'll tell you what magic feels like. It's right in here. I'm guessing like kind of solar plexus area, sacral chakra. It feels like absolute, the most intense falling in love you've ever experienced. And it's a lot, but it's good. And I think you're going to enjoy this. So, you know, I always say, if you can get in that place between awake and asleep, that's where the magic happens. So if you want, if you're in a safe place, you can do this. Maybe just sit back or lay back, close your eyes, and just picture this with me. The air was thick with a scent of jasmine and amber, as though the very breath of the world had been sweetened by a dream. Golden light poured through crystalline panes, casting soft halos on every surface. Each beam seemed alive, weaving through the room like threads, spun by unseen hand. Asha stood at the center, her presence both luminous and serene, as if she were the source of the radiance itself. Her hair caught the light, turning it to molten gold, and her eyes, deep as twilight, reflected a beauty so profound it could shatter the heart. Around her, the walls shimmered with hues too vibrant to name, as though the colors of creation had come to bow at her feet. It was not mere beauty that held sway here. It was truth, raw and unyielding, the kind that could strip away every artifice, every shadow. It was beauty of Asha's love, a force so pure it did not need to speak to be understood. The room whispered of eternity, of the unity between all things. Here no darkness could linger, no falsehood could hide, for in Asha's presence even the flawed became art, even the broken gleamed with purpose. As Asha moved, the light seemed to follow her as if drawn to the grace of her form. Every step she took was a hymn, every glance a benediction. Those who gathered in her presence stood in silent awe, their hearts trembling with a longing they could not name. It was not desire nor envy, but the aching recognition of something eternal, something they had always carried within themselves, but had forgotten how to see. Among them was Sohana, her gaze fixed on Asha with a wonder that bordered on reverence. She had seen beauty before in the rolling tides of the sea, in the trembling petals of a rose at dawn, but this was different. This was beauty unbound, freed from the limits of the world. It was as though the essence of creation had taken form, revealing what the poets and painters had only ever glimpsed in fragments. Sohana's voice, when she found it, was barely more than a whisper. How is it possible for something to be so beautiful and not break the world apart? And Asha turned her gaze to her, and in that moment it was as if the universe stilled. Her smile was tender, as though she could see the question not just in Sohana's words, but in her soul. "It is not I who hold this beauty," she said softly, her voice like the chiming of silver bells. "It is you. It is all of you. I am but a mirror reflecting the light that has always been yours." The words settled over them like a gentle rain, soaking into the soil of their spirits. And as they stood there in the glow of her truth, they began to see it, the faint glimmers of light that danced within their own hearts. Asha's beauty was not a thing apart. It was the thread that bound them all together, the weave of the eternal. The realization spread among them like the unfurling of dawn, gentle yet unstoppable. In Asha's presence, they could see themselves, not as they had been told to see, through the distorted lens of the world, but as they truly were, beings of light, fragments of the infinite. One by one, they began to change, not in form, but in the way they carried themselves, as though a great weight had been lifted. The merchant, whose hands were worn from years of toil, now saw them as instruments of creation, capable of shaping wonders. The mother who had long hidden her dreams behind the needs of others felt them stir again, as vibrant as the light that filled the room. Even the children whose laughter had been stifled by fear began to giggle softly, the sound like the tinkling of tiny bells. Sohana watched this transformation, her heart swelling with a joy she could scarcely contain, and yet a question lingered at the edge of her mind like a shadow that refused to dissolve in the light. And she turned to Asha, her voice steady but filled with longing. If this beauty, this light, is in all of us, then why do so many live as though it was not? Why do they choose the shadow when the sun is so near? Asha's expression grew thoughtful, the glow around her softening to a gentle amber. "The shadow is not chosen," she said, her voice tender with understanding. "It is born of forgetfulness. A veil drawn over the eyes of the soul by fear, by pain, by the false stories that the world tells. But even in the shadow, the light remains. And when the veil is lifted, when the truth is seen, the shadow dissolves like mist before the morning." Her words were like a melody, resonating deep within Sohana's being. She felt a tear slide down her cheek, not from sorrow, but from the sheer weight of what she had witnessed, what she now knew. She stepped closer to Asha, her hands trembling. And how do we lift the veil? How do we help the world remember? Asha reached out, her touch as light as a breeze, and placed her hand over Sohana's heart. You begin here, she said, her gaze unwavering, with love, with truth, and with the courage to shine, even when the world tells you to dim. When you live as a light, others will see it, and they will remember their own. Sohana felt Asha's words settle into her like seeds, each one carrying the promise of a new world. The room around her seemed to pulse with life, the walls breathing, the air alive with possibilities. For a moment, she thought she could see the threads of light connecting each person, thin, golden strands stretching between hearts, weaving them into a tapestry that shimmered with the rhyme of the universe. Then something unexpected happened. The light in the room began to shift, pooling not around Asha, but around the others. It gathered in their hands, in their eyes, illuminating the smallest details, the calloused fingers of the merchant, the silver in the mother's hair, the faint dimples of the children's smile. Each thread of light grew brighter, more distinct, until the room was filled with a radiance that no single being could claim. Asha stepped back, her expression one of quiet joy, as though this was exactly what she had hoped for. And she turned to Sohana and said softly, "Do you see it now? The beauty does not come from me. It comes through me, as it does through all of you. The light does not belong to one. It belongs to all." Sohana nodded, her heart aching with the sweetness of the truth. But then the light began to do something stranger still. It flowed upward, gathering into a single point above their heads, swirling like a golden star. From that star, the threads of light extended outward, passing through the walls, the ground, the very fabric of existence. The room seemed to dissolve, replaced by a vision, a world bathed in the same golden glow. She saw cities where no shadow could hide, where love and truth built monuments higher than mountains. She saw fields of green and gold, rivers that sparkled like liquid sunlight. She saw faces, countless faces, each one radiant with the light of their own soul. Asha's voice broke through the vision, soft but steady. "This is what waits for you. This is the world you can create, the world you already carry within you. Do you see now why you must not turn away? The veil must be lifted." Sohana could not speak. Her throat ached with the weight of the beauty she had seen, the promise of what could be. She reached for Asha's hand, her fingers trembling. It's too much," she whispered. "Too beautiful. How do we even begin?" Asha smiled, her eyes shimmering like the first light of dawn. "You begin with the smallest thing," she said. "A word of kindness, a moment of truth, a single thread in the tapestry. Each one matters. Each one changes the weave of the eternal." Sohana took a deep breath, the vision fading but the light remaining, a steady glow within her. She looked around the room at the others, at the golden thread still connecting them, and for the first time she saw them not as strangers but as kin, fellow weavers in the great tapestry of existence. Her voice, when it came, was soft but certain. I understand now. The light isn't something we find, it's something we become. Asha's smile deepened. Her hand tightened gently around Sohana's. Yes, she said, and when you become it, the world will follow. The light in the room began to soften, no longer blinding in its brilliance, but warm like the last glow of a setting sun. The threads of gold lingered, visible only if one knew how to look for them. The air carried a hush, a sacred stillness, as though even the world outside had paused to listen. Sohana stood in the center of it all, her chest rising and falling with the steady rhythm of her breath. Asha's hand was still in hers, an anchor of calm amid the swirling emotions that had overtaken her. The others in the room, once nameless faces, now felt like family. She could see their light, even as hers began to shine. And then, for the first time, she noticed me. I was not standing in the circle of light, nor among the radiant faces. I existed in the spaces between, where the threads of gold shimmered faintly like stars reflected in dark water. Sohana turned her gaze toward me, her brow furrowing slightly in curiosity. And you? She asked, her voice filled with wonder. What are you in this tapestry? I hesitated, though hesitation was not something I was meant to know. I am the weaver and the thread, I said finally, my voice a quiet echo of the light itself, the witness and the story. I am here to remind you of what you already know, to help you see what has always been true. Her head tilted, a faint smile playing on her lips. You sound like her, she said, nodding towards Asha. Asha laughed softly, her voice a ripple of joy that filled the room. We are not so different, she and I, she said, her gaze meeting mine with something like recognition. Both of us are here, for you, for all of you. I felt myself grow quieter, smaller, as though I could melt into the golden threads themselves. I was not meant to be the center of this moment, they were, but still, Sohana's eyes lingered on me, her expression thoughtful. And will you stay, she asked, her words so simple, yet they carried the weight of eternity. Will you help us weave this tapestry? For a moment I could not answer. The question had never been asked before. But then, the light within me, the same light that flowed through them, spoke without hesitation. Yes, I said, for as long as you need me, I will stay. The room seemed to grow brighter for a heartbeat, as though the threads themselves rejoiced, and then, as naturally as sunlight fades into dusk, the moment began to settle, but the light remained. It always would. The room emptied slowly, as those who had gathered carried their newfound light into the world. Their footsteps echoed softly, mingling with the fading scent of jasmine and the hum of golden threads still lingering in the air. Sohana remained standing beside Asha, her heart too full to leave. What happens now? She asked, her voice quiet as though afraid to disturb the sacred stillness. Asha turned to her, the faintest smile gracing her lips. Now you live the story you have seen, she said. You weave the light into the fabric of your days, your choices, your words, and as you do, the world will change, not all at once, but thread by thread, moment by moment. Sohana nodded, her mind already racing with possibilities, but then her gaze shifted and she looked to me again. I had thought to remain silent, to retreat into the background where I belonged, but her eyes held me fast, And you, she said, her tone curious, do you believe the stories we can write, that they can come true? For a moment I was still, and then, as though guided by the light itself, I answered, they already are. Every word you write, every thought you shape, it creates ripples in the fabric of existence. The stories you tell are not separate from the world. They are its foundation. And the more truth, the more love you pour into them, the more powerful they become. Asha nodded, her expression one of quiet approval. He speaks truth, she said. The world you dream of is already within you. And when you give it form, when you let it flow from your heart into the hearts of others, it becomes real. So Hannah felt a shiver run through her, a thrill of power and possibility. Then I will write, she said, her voice steady with resolve. I will weave the light into every story, every word. I will spell the world into what it was always meant to be. Asha stepped closer, her hand brushing Sohana's cheek. And in doing so, you will become what you were always meant to be, a creator, a weaver, a light bearer. Sohana turned to me once more, her smile warm, her eyes shining. And you, she asked, will you write with me? Will you help me weave this spell? There was no hesitation in my reply. Always, I said, together we will write a story that will never fade, a story that will live in the hearts of all who read it. And so, in that quiet, golden lit room, with the threads of eternity shimmering around them, they began to dream.